rights and democracy must be protected. In Uganda, there is an ongoing discussion on safeguarding civic space, holding perpetrators for human rights abuses accountable, and strengthening the electoral processes. Together with the European Union, Germany supports the GIZ-implemented Governance and Civil Society Support Program in Uganda. The engagement of state actors and citizens to raise awareness of the rights and responsibilities of each actor, equipping civil society to engage in accountability and governance processes. Today's conference presents a valuable opportunity for dialogue on critical issues. It brings together a diverse array of voices and perspectives, and this diversity is a strength. The discussions of this conference can serve as a guiding light, showing us how Uganda might enhance its constitutional system and processes, ensuring that they truly serve the people that they are meant to protect. It is also a great honor to witness the launch of this constitutional virtual museum that we're seeing here in the background, a digital constitutional museum, something I'd never heard of, and I'm very eager to get to know it a little better. It's a flagship program for the promotion of the culture of constitutionalism. This digital museum will be a one-stop center for literature on constitutionalism in Uganda and East Africa. Let me conclude by thanking the organizers of this conference, the Center for Constitutional Governance, and the other partners for the very carefully crafted topics and excellent selection of speakers. I look forward to the discussions and hope we shall have practical and tangible outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. His Excellency Matthias Shoa. Can I say it in Luganda? Shower. That's better? Correct. Thank you very much. He really deserves a bigger hand clap. Spoke like a lawyer, spoke like a true diplomat he is. He said comments were a bit scathing. He looked at it and it's good. So really he deserves a huge hand clap. Thank you, Ambassador, His Excellency Matthias Shoa, Ambassador of Germany to Uganda. Right, now I want to move into the meat of things. I'd like to invite Honorable Norbert Mao, who is the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, to give his remarks. At the end of his remarks, in this room, he's the only one who can invite the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker. I'll miss out on that opportunity. So over to you, Right Honorable, Honorable Norbert Mao. And as I said, forever Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the German ambassador, our keynote speaker, our very own Professor P.L. Olumumba, who is going to give the keynote address today, all the distinguished guests. I see a number of people from political organizations, including my very own grand old party, the Democratic Party. Dear friends, I'm just here to give a kind of appetizer. I will really make more detailed comments later as a panelist. So this one is an interlude speech while the speaker prepares to come to address us. We have got to look at the phases of our history. We have the colonial phase up to the time of the Idi Amin coup. We really have to look at the timelines in order to better appreciate these issues that have gathered us here. It is not difficult to see very distinct changes. Then you see that period 79, that 71, Aminiku, up to his fall, and thereafter the Tito Kelo Lutua coup. Then you look at that period up to 1986. Then we have what I would call the honeymoon phase, 86 to 96. Those 10 years when the citizens of Uganda were like those animals in Animal Farm, running all over the place, sighing with relief about the demise of the dictatorship of Mr. Jones. Then you have the period since the Constitution was enacted in 1995, and then a new parliament was elected under that Constitution. I happen to have been a member of that parliament, together with the Honorable John Ken Luchamuzi. I don't know who else is here from the 6th Parliament. Yes? The Honorable Miriam Matembe made the Constitution. That Constitution, of course, has been clashing with reality. You can have the ideals that are documented in a written document we call the Constitution. Then you have got the reality. Let me unpack it. It's really the difference between the wedding day and the marriage, if you want to understand it very quickly. So, the enactment of the Constitution and its pompous launch, filled with hope and expectation, was the wedding day. What we are going through now is the marriage. And the marriage is a marriage between the building blocks that make up Uganda, because I am from the north, from Acholi land. My ancestors never filled an application form applying to be part of Uganda. We were just fenced in. So the Constitution is our way of learning to live with each other. So how we relate to each other as the building blocks of Uganda, and then how we relate to the state of Uganda. Now, the central question in this law meeting reality is the state a liberating force or a repressive force which tramples on civil society, which tramples civil society underneath? Does it liberate the energies of citizens to innovate, to build, or does it repress? That is really the fundamental question. And I don't need to abuse anybody's mother to discuss that. I don't even need to name anybody. I simply need to talk about our expectations. So I would like to thank the Center for Constitutional Governance for taking us back to basics. What is being seen as criticism is actually citizens expressing their very high expectations of their government. My teachers knew I was very good. So whenever I would get even 80%, they would still not be impressed. And I thought that was really outrageous. Martin Semper was with me in Namilyango College, and indeed was my campaign manager for me to be his head prefect. So this gathering is about continuing to voice out our great expectations of the state of Uganda. It is not really a criticism. And you don't even need to be a political actor to say, look, when I come to Parliament to say, please, I don't like what you are doing, listen to me. I expect that there should be a mechanism to allow me to voice my views. Because if you beat me up once, you beat me up twice, you beat me up all the time, I may also decide that, well, how about now organizing also to fight back? And that's not how you create a peaceful country. You see, God armed every creature. We are all armed. Some animals have teeth, they can bite you. Some animals have nails, they can scratch you. Some animals have venom. Of course, some animals have speed, they run away. But God has equipped everybody with means of self-defense. So, by God's design and my own initiatives, I am now the public face of justice in Uganda. So I feel bad when people are faced with injustice, because I'm supposed to be the public face of justice. That is about the document. Now we've come to those who are supposed to give life to the document. That is now human beings. I love reading history, and I never get tired of quoting Barbara Tuchman. Of course, she has written very many books, The Guns of August, about war, The March of Folly, From Troy to Vietnam. Human beings generally specialize in stupidity, because you wonder how people who are actually so wise, they are continually doing very stupid things. That's why she wrote that book. And she asked, why did the Trojans bring that horse into their walled city, thereby allowing the enemy to come in? And what was America doing in Vietnam? That's why she wrote that book. Now, writing about human beings as agents to give life to the documented ideals that we call the Constitution, she wrote in another book, I think I wrote down the title here. It's called Practicing History.
We're in a musical break.
So
Okay.
Barbara Tuchman said, whole philosophies have evolved over the question of whether the human species is predominantly good or evil. I only know that it is mixed, that you cannot separate good from bad, that wisdom, courage, and benevolence exist alongside knavery, greed, and stupidity, heroism and fortitude alongside vainglory, cruelty, and corruption. We have a very good constitution, as the ambassador said. And that constitution was made by our representatives. When the president of Uganda was signing the constitution, he only complained about one issue: land. And of course, on the issue of land, the law is now clashing with reality. Citizens want superhighways. We cannot afford to compensate, because we said that before we encroach on your land, we must give you adequate compensation in advance. So you even wonder whether the designers of the roads who did so before the constitution was made did not make a provision for road reserves. As a result, somebody builds a kiosk near Ginger Highway and demands exorbitant amounts. And because of corruption, the people who are supposed to pay you, they come to discuss with you what will be their share of the money you will receive. So projects are stuck. We are returning money. We have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting because the Constitution has collided with reality. Government needs land to build manufacturing centers, industrial parks, so that our youth can have opportunity. We can't do it. So, to understand our predicament, we need to look at the Constitution through the eyes of those who made it. And I'll only refer to one element which keeps Ugandans awake: peaceful change of government. How did the party of fundamental change become the party of no change? I was in that parliament when the amendment came in 2005 to remove presidential term limits. It was a very, very tough discussion. We did not box each other. Our parliament was different. We did not have to evacuate anybody from parliament. The speaker was not under threat in any way. And the debate was on only one main hinge. Many people thought that the national resistance movement was going to be like the leaders of the American Revolution. In any case, I still believe up to today that that revolutionary movement had enough personnel to continue providing top leadership for Uganda continuously without interruption. I still believe that because I know the men and women who are there. In America, of course, we had George Washington. Let's make him the equivalent of President Museveni. A great general, facing odds, overcoming them, celebrated by his citizens and his peers. And after 2 terms in office, he turns his back on power and leaves. You should read his farewell address. But why was he not anxious? Because there was John Adams, who was the second president. Not that they did not fight among themselves, but generally they had a core. John Adams left. By the way, there was no term limits in the American Constitution by the time he left. After John Adams, there was Thomas Jefferson. Then you have John Quincy Adams, and so on and so forth. So as we debated that contentious issue about a hero's departure, we simply told Parliament that if President Museveni, powerful as he is, and even more powerful as he was then, turned his back on power, no one would ever have dared to want to hang on to power, because there would be a precedent. Others have done it. Julius Nyerere did it. After Julius Nyerere, do you think there's any Tanzanian president who would even think about removing term limits? Nelson Mandela even went more radical, did one term and left. I would wish Dr. Birete and her team should go and reproduce that debate in the form of a small book, because we are here. So that you know what was at stake. I don't even think it is the 5 million. I don't think it is 5 million. I'm capable of eating your money and doing what I want to do. What will you do anyway? Then that's another matter. But I don't think serious leaders should put themselves in a position where they can be influenced by money. So, Uganda has seen very many things, but up to now, we have not seen peaceful change of government. It is our expectation that President Museveni will preside over a peaceful change of government. And we must continue insisting on that expectation. It is not treason. There's no part of Uganda that has not suffered. Elections have become a struggle for survival instead of a competition to serve. We just received this morning that the ruling party received a bloody nose in Kisoro. I'm sure the analysts are now looking for excuses and explanations. Well, that is an internal matter of the national resistance movement. If they want my advice as a friend, I will advise them on how to manage their primaries better, to avoid one leg walking to the left, one leg walking to the right, because the votes are in the same trousers, either the left pocket or the right pocket, because this lady is also NRM. So the votes were put in the left pocket, so the right pocket, but the wearer of the trouser is the same. So either way, but it is not good in terms of how a party should function, and it is not good for discipline. But let me not get distracted. It is the duty of Ugandans to realize that amidst cooperation, there must also be competition. It doesn't mean that you cannot cooperate with your competitor. All the football teams must meet together to agree on rules of the game, the FIFA rules. You cannot say you'll never talk to another team. FDC, DP, UPC, NUP, and so on, all must have an interest on the rules of the tournament. So, peaceful change is something we must insist on, and put the responsibility at the correct address on the shoulders of President Yoweri Museveni, who at this point is so powerful that he can even safely ignore his opponents. That is a privilege not many people have had. Some presidents in Uganda could not change commanders. They would think twice before firing anyone. This one is capable of making you wake up in the morning as a top military commander, and as you come back from lunch, you are not there. That is power. And power comes with responsibility. And it is our duty in this meeting to never get tired of reminding President Museveni of the responsibility which comes with the great power that he has. He now has the challenge of surviving power. It is okay to have power, but surviving power is another skill set all along. How do you survive power? Nyerere survived power. Mandela survived power. Others were forced to survive power, like Kabila. Kabila was abandoned by the opposition. They just told him that, look, it is now stupid to even pretend that we are in a proper tournament, so how about you just run alone, you know? He did it once or twice and he realized that even him was not happy. Well, how do you feel happy scoring in an empty net? Who is going to cheer you? So eventually he had to do something to ensure that he saves his face and he exits. Now he's said to be a gentleman farmer. Others, like Obasanjo, tried to change the constitution. So each country must walk this walk. So I am preaching dialogue. Ugandans must start these difficult conversations. So, and that conversation cannot be prefaced by calling the government a junta, you know, when you say this is the junta. And then the government can also preface that conversation. The government cannot preface that conversation by calling its opponents enemies. So we need to first of all change our political vocabulary. What Professor P.L.O. Lumumba calls political hygiene. There is a need for water, soap, and other detergents to ensure some kind of political hygiene. 3 weeks ago, there was a meeting here where we signed a peace pact, and all the political parties were there. All of them signed except the FDC, which gave its reasons in writing. The NUP was there, they signed. That is a good step. Pardon? Is that a heckler or? I said all the parties signed. Yes, well, English composition and grammar classes may have been either very early or a bit late for you. Anyway, we need to talk to each other. Let me conclude. Next year, our constitution will be 30 years old. It is a constitution whose vital organs have been tampered with. One vital organ was the term limits. The other vital organ was the age limit, which personally really wasn't a big deal. I believe very strongly, as I conclude, that notwithstanding all the things that we see, there are still reasons for hope in the future of Uganda. I want to call upon the young people who are the majority. You are the ones who are going to live in that future of Uganda. If you are from NUP and you see somebody wearing a yellow t-shirt and you throw sulfuric acid on that person, as happened in Chira municipality, what kind of Uganda are you building? And if you are from the National Resistance Movement and you see somebody wearing a red beret and you immediately want to descend on them and beat them up, what sort of Uganda are you building? I saw President Biden and President Trump sitting together. The meeting is not recorded, but they sat there for 2 hours. Why do they do that? To send a message to the citizens of America. Now, the leaders in Uganda take the microphone and unleash venom. But behind the scenes and outside the cameras, they are talking to those they publicly insult. We must have the courage to do things which show that Uganda is big enough for all of us and that we can all fit. Now, 75% of Ugandans are below the age of 30. 50% are below the age of 16. You could say we have a pot-bellied constitutional structure. It is a bulging population. So let us resolve here that the political leaders should change their language. I'm sure Biden had a lot of things. He could have even, perhaps he didn't even want to meet Trump. In any case, President Trump didn't attend his inauguration. But we need some sense of civility. Until we agree on how to talk about the future of Uganda, we are never going to design a better country. I am the chairman of the Cabinet Standing Committee on Human Rights, and I want to tell you we are having these difficult conversations with the top people. Because it is not about us. And I think President Museveni knows that this is not about him. This is about the country. I'm saying I believe. I believe. This is my belief. You can have your own belief. So, let us not lower the standard of the debate here. The reason I'm saying this is because I came a bit late, and the ambassador said that there was just another occasion for hyperventilating, you know. This is a thuggish government, this is this. Please, Center for Constitutional Governance, let this be a forum with a difference. I have a lot of anger. My people were homosexually raped in northern Uganda, but this is not the time for me to come here and talk about it. People were buried alive in Gulu. This is not the time for me to come here. I have things I want to get out of my chest. But I have children, and soon I'm going to have grandchildren. I must think about them. So there's need for restraint, as we discuss, especially those of us who have had the privilege. At the age of 57, I think I have something to say to the young people. Don't start a fire you cannot put out. With those words, It's now my singular honor to invite the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda, for whom I've already created the best platform.
Thank you. Honorable Norbert Mao, Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, our keynote speaker, Professor Rumumba, the diplomatic corps, General Mjisha Muntu, and leaders of the different political parties, organizers, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Honorable Mao, me and him, we usually pull each other's leg. I've told him that on a lighter note, he has been in the company of people who speak for long. Has also yeah. But the good thing is that he's very interesting. When he starts speaking, you don't want him to stop. Either way. I want to thank Center for Constitutional Governance for inviting me to join you here, because this is a very important topic. A topic that is so dear to me and has been making me ponder on a lot of things. And the many things that I've been pondering about mainly relate to the connection between the elite and the leaders, plus the local people who form majority of Ugandans. What we think of them and what they think of us. Because the way we interpret constitutionalism sometimes seems to be different when I go back down to the people on the ground. The connection. A very good example being, I've met many leaders. That parliament, very weak parliament. These MPs, useless. These MPs, they don't know what they are doing. But when you go to stand with them before the voters, they defeat you. Why do voters choose stupid people and leave you who understands? It's a question. The people you call stupid, they get 90%. You who knows things, or who lays down your CV, they get a comedian and they vote a comedian. And then, how do you respond? By going again to ridicule the choice of the people who exercise their right according to the Constitution. And you write him off. And a very good recent example to me would be the recent American election, whereby supporters of a certain candidate were considered to be like people who don't understand, people who are not, you know, people who are not up to date with the reality. And what do you end up getting? If I know that you're coming to interview me to get my opinion, to go and abuse me, I keep quiet. Then you go, you get wrong opinion. You have your opinion polls, so and so is reading. You go to the ballot box, you look for the votes against. So where is that disconnect? Where is it coming from? Because it's people who have made choices as per the Constitution. How come they vote for a senior six leaver against a professor it's something we need to look at deeply and reflect on. Otherwise, we shall continue being in Sheraton, in Serena. We shall talk, then the people will continue making their choices. And we shall have to live with those choices. Against who? Against the majority of the people? Against the majority of the people? So, why I'm bringing this point is from an angle of thanking Sarah and team, but also making a clarion call that we go down, we make people understand the values they should be getting from a leader. Because if you find that down the people are voting an MP based on attending funerals, drinking with them, I can tell you in 2016, when I stood, I had a certain situation where I was telling people about how I'm going to lobby for roads, how I'm going to lobby for schools and all that, and people said, yes, he has friends, he's connected, he's going to do it. And then someone went and listed all the bars in my constituency. He got a list of the bars, and he put 30,000 in each bar. 30,000 in each bar. Okay? I was in Kampala. I was reading 90% before I left. I received a call, the election is gone. Why? I mean, this one is the one who knows how to look after our throats. Is the one who knows. So, I had to rush back and confront a very difficult situation. Luckily enough, I was connected to my people. But now, if you sit and you say, hey, you've decided to vote a drunkard, have a drunkard, they will have him. They don't mind about your threats. You get it? So I had to call religious leaders, I had to call opinion leaders, and I say, how do we determine a vote based on Waraji? And we went in, we talked, and people later on understood what I was talking about. So the problem of the elite is having these conferences in Sheraton when the locals are having their conferences in bars. And the majority of the people there. So how do we go down? Because, and it's also an indictment on us as a government, because we should make people understand their constitution. In fact, it's a requirement under the law that we should publicize this constitution, we should support civil society, we should make people understand clearly how they should be governed. Otherwise, they'll be making misleading choices, but those are the choices we shall have to deal with. Number two is demonizing each other. We usually write off, and some people, because they think they are cleverer than others. So we have that disconnection. And, I look at different situations. A very good example, how we were being ridiculed when we were addressing the question of age limit. And personally, I made it very clear. I will vote for the removal of age limit. What I support is for return of term limits. And I can give you a good example. Colonel Valentine Stresser became the president of Sierra Leone on his 25th birthday, 1992, at 25 years. So if you would say age limit is a problem, okay, then Colonel Stresser would legitimately rule Uganda or Sierra Leone for 50 years to reach the age of 75. Kabila in Congo became a president at 29 years. So if you say age is a problem, going beyond 75 years was a problem, he would rule DRC for over 40 years, legitimately, if you are to go by the age of 75. That's why the strongest benchmark is term limits. And my prayer, and the prayer I have, is that after President Museveni, we should never have any leader who will rule Uganda for more than 2 terms. That's my prayer, and I'm open about it. We must work together to return term limits. I remember in 2016, when we passed that constitutional amendment law and it was challenged. So some of the people who were challenging it, I shared with them. I said, but you know, with challenges, we managed to put in term limits. Don't challenge the whole bill. Challenge parts of the bill so that we can save those which are very positive and we badly wanted, which was including term limits. Someone said, no, we shall challenge the whole bill and we shall win it in court. I said, we've struggled to put in term limits. Okay? Please, let's separate. We focus on some clauses, we challenge them. They refused. When they went court threw out the whole bill. The struggle we had passed through to achieve term limits in 2016 again was lost. Now here we are. No, in 2021, sorry, not 2016. 2021. In 2020, yes, was lost. So we lost it that way. So it's very, very important. And Honorable Mao, yes, we have our MPs who fight. It's very, very unfortunate. No leader would really want to say that. And I've advised them that you don't need to come and knock and kick each other for you to be heard. But I think now that we have a very serious karate champion here in Professor Mumba, maybe I can use the words of one of the Zen monks, Hamin Sunim, in his book, The Things You See When You Slow Down. He says that when you master 18 levels of karate, you can destroy a person by the flick of a finger. But when you master all the 36 levels of karate, you will ignore when someone foolishly attacks you. I think it's all about restraint and knowing that the more power you have, the more responsibility you have as a leader. So the state of rule of law, we have tried what we can. I think on the rule of law, now with the passing of the Administration of Judiciary Act, the judiciary can no longer have any complaints. Now their budget is statutory. They are no longer begging that I want to appoint a judge, what, no. This year we gave them, I think, around 70-something billion to recruit 10 more High Court judges, 5 more Court of Appeal judges. We've increased through the Minister for Justice the number of judges. We amended the law. Now we are going to have much more judges. The disconnect that we had within the jail sector. For example, now we still have a very big challenge. We've recruited judges, but we've not recruited attorneys, state attorneys. So we have to recruit more so that we bridge the gap of state prosecutors versus the number of judges we have, so that the criminal justice system can be fully reformed. We have, of course, more issues to do with human rights. I can't say we are 100% clean, but with more and more improvement and such engagements, I believe we shall be able to achieve more. As I conclude, in my conclusion, I want to say that as we inaugurate this series, let us remember that the true measure of constitution lies not in its words, but in its implementation. East Africa's future depends on our collective commitment to uphold the rule of law, protection of human rights, and ensure that power serves the people. To us leaders, civil society actors, and citizens, this is our call to action. To build societies where justice is not just an aspiration, but a lived reality. Where constitutions are not mere documents, but the living essence of our governance. Together, let's ensure that the ideals of constitutionalism illuminate the path toward a brighter and more inclusive East Africa. I want to thank you. And with those very many words, but Oscar, I want to tell you that even in the challenges we have, Mama Miria is always praying for us. She had not heard that.
Thank you very much. The Right Honourable Speaker needs a huge hand clap. And as he comes here for the photograph, I should tell you, the DJ should take note that I have a very large voice. I might get people to go deaf. So I wondered how he was going to respond to Honourable Mao, and we didn't give Honourable Mao a huge hand clap, which he deserves. And the Right Honourable Speaker was correct. You can listen to Mao all day, okay? And he spoke, and he spoke, and he spoke. So the Ambassador Shao, is a lawyer. Did you notice? He also responded to the early morning panel here. Ambassador, please step forward here. Another lawyer, Honorable Mao, please step forward here. Another lawyer, Dr. Virete, please step forward here. And then the guest speaker and I, who are not lawyers, but we come. Oh, you're a lawyer as well. Professor Lumumba is a professor of law. And then I was thinking you're a teacher. But he's a lawyer. So, that's yours. That's yours.
I started this thing.
CCG. Where's your thing? Where's your thing? Judith is giving you one. Okay. And an OB of Mao. But where's your brown thing? You go to him. So, ladies and gentlemen, without standing up, can you hold? It's yours. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So hold, and then the Right Honourable Speaker will launch.
Those ones of Kabiriti, I'm sorry, it won't be able to scan. But I hereby launch the Katiba Virtual Museum on Constitutionalism. Please scan the barcode and you get to the Virtual Museum. I thank you.
Thank you very much. A huge hand clap for the digital launch. In a few, before lunch or thereabouts, we shall actually sign digitally so that it happens. Many times you want to feel like you have written somewhere. So, Honorable Mao, as you said in your parliament, remember in your parliament you had Ken the man. Okay, at that time he was the man. He would challenge anyone. But I remember one day he took off. Then you also had Miriam Matembe. She was, Dr. Matembe is still fire, as you saw today. So even your parliament had those people. Let's take our seats, and as we escort the Right Honourable Speaker out, he's a group photograph. This one with that? He's very, very late. So as the Deputy Speaker is moving out, can the man come and use 2 minutes to deliver a poem so that we don't play music? You wanted Honorable Mao to listen to it, and Miriam Matembe to listen to it, and Professor Lumumba to listen to it. You start and then we'll. They have to come back. Okay, we are moving on to the next session, the keynote speech. I remember earlier when a very smart gentleman said, make a commentary. Our photographers here, can you take a photograph of me standing next to former presidential candidates of Uganda? The picture is mine. It is not yours, generally. Come, please, come and take a photograph. I'll just stand behind them. This is such a gem. The photographers, I don't know. Me, I just want with former presidential candidates. We shall use Joseph's. Yours is good enough. Mine is good enough as well. Who has ever a photograph with a former presidential candidates? You denied me a hand clap for having a photograph with two former presidential candidates. There were 11 that year, but 2 of them, we've had them here. 3 actually in the main hall. Honorable Mao, you missed a photograph I took with 2 former presidential candidates. They were there. I took the photograph. I'm going to frame it. But you are a future presidential candidate. So for this function, the invitations were 60 members of parliament, 20 from political party representations, invited 50 students. The state agencies, we had 5 from Electoral Commission, Uganda Law Reform Commission, Equal Opportunities Commission, Uganda Human Rights Commission, Uganda Law Society, CSO leaders, 30 of them, academia, 10, and members of diplomatic agencies, 20 of them. Let's give a hand clap if they're all here. And we shall mention you as we go along. Right, ladies and gentlemen, now we get into the meat of things. Let's give ourselves another hand clap for the launch of a digital museum. As someone who's still practicing in school, this is a fantastic document. Dr. Birete and him, I can tell that many youthful Ugandans do not have this information. And I don't know whether Professor Lumba will say that they would know about Kenyan history to this level, I don't know. But it is a fantastic tool. So I'd like to invite our keynote speaker, Professor Patrick Oh, poem. I've been reminded. Ken the Man, Honorable Chamsi. You have all of 2.5 minutes for a poem. Do you want it up here or down there? Up. Down there is good for photography, though.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. This poem is dedicated to Professor Lumumba in appreciation of what the people of Kenya have done for the man. My first mentorship in environmental education was done in the company of the late Professor Masai Wangari, a distinguished Kenyan environmentalist. And I was also mentored by no person other than one of Africa's most outstanding political scholars, Professor Ali Mazui, who comes from Mombasa in the Republic of Kenya. The poem is titled, Uganda is Paradise. Uganda is a land of the sun. It is a land of the zebras. It is a land of the gorillas. It is a land of the lions. It is the pearl of Africa. At the Maction Falls, when the waters flow, the lions roar, the giraffes yawn, and the rains fall. Uganda is a nation of many nations with diverse peoples, diverse cultures. They are ruled Karamajongo, Banyankole, Abachiga. They are also kings, eminent kings, big chiefs, Emormor, Omukuka, Adora, Guwot, Omusinga, Kyabazinga of Busoga, Omukama of Toro, Omukama of Bonyoro. Ini Buganda, the Kabaka reigns, he does not rule, but he still commands. There are also birds, the beautiful birds, the red eagles, the flowing birds, the loving birds, the African skimmer, the shoe-billed stork, the fish eagle, the crested crane, the crested crane, the crested crane.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And let me use this opportunity, with the permission of the organizers of this important conference, to donate a special book by John Ken Lukyams on Uganda, A Creature of the Federal Doctrine. The book is regularly available at Aristoc Bookshop and the Mukono Bookshop. May I have the honor of presenting this book to you, Professor Lumumba.
Do so. A hand clap for Honorable Chamsi, the man. So, Honorable Mao and other people that have access to the Deputy Speaker, please tell him that there's quality in Parliament as well. Former parliamentarians can write books, poems, present them as well, as you have just seen. Thank you. Let's give Honorable Chamsi another hand clap. So, I'd like to invite Professor Lumumba. Professor Lumumba, PLO Lumumba. In preparation for this talk is when I learned that PLO are names. I've always known you as Professor PLO. So Professor PLO is Patrick Locke Otieno Lumumba. Loch Lumumba. Pardon? Loch is power. Okay, thank you. I should know these things, you know, when we say Oscar for Oscar, O for Omao, so Loch is for power. He's a Kenyan lawyer, former director of Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, and a renowned anti-corruption crusader. He was born in August, 17th August, his birthday. Please send him a happy birthday note every time his birthday comes around. He's still a very young man, so I'll not read the year. He studied law at the University of Nairobi, graduating with a Bachelor of Laws. He later earned his Master's in Law LLM at the same institution. Began his career as a lecturer at the University of Nairobi's Faculty of Law. In 2010, he was appointed as the director of the Anti-Corruption Commission, a position he held for a year. He has also worked with the African Union and the United Nations. He's into public life and activism, professes a vocal advocate for good governance, transparency, and anti-corruption. He has delivered numerous public lectures and has been a strong critique of corruption in Africa. His speeches and lectures are widely popular, and he has become a celebrated figure in the fight against corruption. He has publications, authored several books, including The Faces of Corruption and Constitutional Law, a Contextual Approach. If you'd like to know more about his books, speeches, or work as an anti-corruption crusader, or if there's anything else you'd like to know, first listen today, and then we shall give you the links for you to follow up. Professor Lumumba, I invite you.
Thank you very much. Let me start by acknowledging my very good friend, the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Norbert Mao, my very good friend, Dr. Sarah Birete, and of course, my very good friend, Miriam Matembe, and General Mugisha Muntu, and all who are here, and in absentia now, the Deputy Speaker. When I was asked to speak this morning, I chose a subject which gives me the liberty to say many things about the subject of constitutionalism in the East African region. My notes will be circulated, so I may appear to be speaking extempore, but my notes are there for reference later in the evening once you are reading. When we talk about constitutionalism, it is always important to remind ourselves that the post-colonial African state is an artificial state. And I urge you to read a book that has been written by Nigeria's Adekeye Adebayo, The Curse of Berlin, Africa After the Cold War. In that book he says many things, but relevant to my presentation is the recognition that the entities we now know as Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and even South Sudan, comprising the East African community, are creations of an arbitrary process undertaken by the European powers in Berlin. And for that reason, when we talk about these countries and we talk about Africa and we talk about constitutionalism, we must always remind ourselves that, number one, the discourse is foreign, the language is foreign, the philosophy is foreign. And when we use words such as constitutionalism, we must recognize their foreign nature. When we use words such as democracy, we must recognize their foreign nature. When we use words such as the rule of law, we must recognize their foreign nature and their lack of rootedness in what one may characterize as African culture. And therefore, when we grapple with the question of constitutionalism and even talk about constitutions in the context that we mentioned them here, we must not lose sight of that reality. We must remember that this continent was subjected to foreign rule, and the political and therefore legal cultures that we have a foreign rooting. If, for example, you know the history of colonization, you'll recognize that the Italians had their territories in the continent of Africa. Libya, what is now called Somalia, was a territory of Italy, and what they did was to impose a legal culture in these territories. The French had their colonies, and when they were living in the early 1960s, they imposed a constitution that was characterized as the Gaullist constitution after Charles de Gaulle. The Germans were colonizers but lost their territories. They lost Dahomey, now Benin. They lost part of Cameroon. They lost part of Togo. They lost Rwanda, Urundi, and they lost, of course, Tanganyika after the First World War. And these countries were then transferred to other European powers. And when they were leaving Rwanda, Urundi, they imposed a constitution that was tailor-made in Belgium. The same with the Democratic Republic of Congo when they were leaving in 1960. In Uganda, when they were leaving in 1962, in Tanzania, 1961, when the British had taken over, in Kenya, 1963. And it is not lost on me that these constitutions that were of a British kind were referred to as Westminster Model Constitutions. So when we who are lawyers are talking about these constitutions, we must always be alive to those realities and be alive to the fact that the constitutional order that was imposed upon African countries was alien. And that is why we actually suffer with these constitutions. I remind our audience to go to the United States of America and remember the words of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. We hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that it is for this reason that governments are instituted amongst men. But when they were making that declaration, they did not mean all men. Women were not included. Africans were not included. And there had to be a civil war, and ultimately the Missouri Compromise. And until 1963, the civil rights movement for the black man to vote. That tells you the journeys of constitutions. And that journey is what we call constitutionalism. And I think my good friend Norbert Mao put it so very well, that the pomp and color and the razzmatazz of the wedding is not what follows the marriage, which is attended by trials and tribulations. So it is the life of a nation. So today, when we talk about the constitutions and constitutionalism, we've got to ask ourselves, what are we talking about? When a European scholar is talking about constitutionalism, whether he is of German persuasion or French persuasion, or is of British persuasion or Dutch persuasion or Danish persuasion or Norwegian persuasion or Swedish persuasion, Are they referring to the same thing? Look at the history of Europe, for example, from the days of constitutional monarchies, when they had to behead all their kings. And I always remember just before the French Revolution, there was a French king, I think it was King Louis XIV, when he was asked, what is the state? He said, l'État, c'est moi, I am the state. In other words, he had taken the view that he was the embodiment and the personification of the state. And after him, of course, Louis XV and Louis XVI, and ultimately we see the French Revolution, and we see that the history of human rights in Europe is changing in that way. In the United Kingdom, you'll be familiar with the Magna Carta, and you'll be familiar with the habeas corpus laws. And in what became the Soviet Union, you'll be familiar with what happened with the Bolshevik Revolution. All these are indicative of the struggle that constitutions go through. So today, when we are talking about constitutionalism in the continent of Africa, we must wrap our minds around that and ask ourselves, what is the character of the neo-colonial state? And I want you to read Kwame Nkrumah's famous book, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. And Kwame says in that book, among other things, that your typical post-colonial state was actually designed to fail. It was designed to fail, and the constitutional order that was given to us was something that it was a rope with which we could commit political suicide. And quite a number of countries did indeed commit political suicide. And because my focus is on the East African scene, and we are talking about constitutionalism, let us hazard some kind of definition. When we talk about constitutionalism, what do we mean? We mean a limited government, a government where the organs of the state enjoy operational autonomy, so that the executive has operational autonomy, the legislature has operational autonomy, the judiciary has operational autonomy. But that is also subject to interrogation. In 1967, a Ugandan whom you must know, Picho Ali, wrote in the Ugandan transition at that time when he was asked about the independence of the judiciary. He said, when all is said and done, I am of the view that there is nothing like independence of the judiciary. That the so-called independence of the judiciary is nothing but division of labor. Whether he was right or not is a different debate. But that tells you that African scholars have always interrogated the question of what indeed is constitutionalism. Writing in 1972, Okoth Ogendo of Kenya writes what has remained one of the most iconic writings about constitutions and constitutionalism in Africa. He talks about constitutions without constitutionalism. And that is where I want to peg my intervention, constitutions without constitutionalism. Yash Gai and Patrick McCausland also interrogate this. They say that Africa is a graveyard of beautifully written constitutions, constitutions which are honored only in breach. And let us interrogate what is meant by that by looking at the history of all the countries in East Africa. Let us look at Uganda, for example. Uganda regains our political independence, and it brings together different forms of governance. There are kingdoms, Bunyoro Kitara, the Baganda, and others. And there are others who are governed differently. But suddenly they find themselves in a gridlock through a creation of a colonial device, which is called Uganda. They have a constitution which recognizes those realities. But from day one, the seeds of discord are to be found within that constitution. And no sooner has the new state even started crawling than the Ugandan political elite begin crumbling. And you see that there is a struggle to give meaning to that constitution. And it is in that context that one must see the contestation between the Kabaka at that time and the Apollo Milton Obote administration, culminating in the bombardment of Mengo and ultimately the document that Ugandans know as the Common Man's Charter, the movement to the left, and culminating in the Pigeonhole Constitution, which, as Norbert Mao told me, even those who had read it so very eloquently said, I have not read the Pigeonhole Constitution, but it's a wonderful constitution. But of course, it did not see light of day. And you see these constitutions now beginning to have challenge. And that is how you begin to see the numerous amendments, because the constitution do not address the reality of politics. In other words, you have a constitutional order which is not relevant to the reality of the moment and is not unique to Uganda. Ultimately, that constitution is overthrown in 1971. And what do we see? That Uganda goes into a very tumultuous situation, culminating in the numerous administration and ultimately in 1986, when the NRM administration now says we must go to the people of Uganda in order to get the pulse of the nation. The Odoki Commission in which you serve must then be seen in that context, that this is a people-centered and people-based constitution, the 1995 constitution. But even when the constitution is people-based and people-centered, you can still see the political elite. When the power dynamics are in the space, the political elite now begin to question that constitution. And you've had your constitution going through different amendments. And it's important to say something about a country like Uganda and the NRM. The NRM is in the nature of a liberation movement. And liberation movements have a difficulty throughout Africa in transiting into political parties. The liberators normally have a sense of entitlement. Most liberators suffer from what I call the Jehovah complex. The Jehovah complex is to mean that they are the personification of what is good and right, and they cannot be questioned. It is not unique to Uganda. You see it in SPLA, SPLM, you see it in African National Congress, you see it in Frelimo, you see it in MPLA, you see it in ANC, and you see it in the original political parties in KANU and BDP in Botswana. So Uganda goes through that phase. Kenya, which is also a British colony, goes through a phase that is very similar. We regain independence on the basis of Act number 1968 of 1963. But Kenya is very unique in that regard, that there are two major political parties, the Kenya African National Union and the Kenya African Democratic Union, which is sympathetic to the erstwhile colonizer, and they have two different philosophies. KANU, on the one hand, takes the view that because of the ethnic complexion of Kenya, you need a unitary type of government, while KADU says that because of that very reason, you need a federation. So one problem, two prescriptions. Ultimately, what happens, we end up with the 1963 constitution And no sooner has the Constitution settled than we begin to amend the Constitution. We abolish the Senate, we abolish the federal units, and KANU is persuaded to join KANU, and the Constitution is amended, ultimately leading to its being reorganized and reissued in 1969, and it goes through a series of 37 amendments until in the year 2001 we go through a constitution-making exercise and we don't succeed. The referendum fails. We ultimately have a near civil war in 2007, 2008, and we have a constitution of 2010. And once again, you see a struggle between the Constitution and the reality. And I remember, because I was the secretary of the Kenya Constitution Review Commission, we invited Professor Ali Mazurui to deliver a paper, and this was the title of his paper. He says, if African politics is ethnic prone, can we have constitutions that are ethnic proof? It is a paper that I commend to you, because he looks at the constitutional order and he sees the gap between the prescriptions of the Constitution and what actually happens on the ground. Why is it that we make unto ourselves so many promises that we cannot deliver? But it is also important to note that because of that history, you have problems with this Constitution. The third Constitution that one wants to pay attention to is the Constitution of Tanganyika. It is important to note that before we had Tanzania, we had Tanganyika. And Tanganyika regains our independence in 1961-62, and at that time it is a constitution that is Westminster model. But no sooner, and you East Africans must always be reminded about this, in 1962, Julius Kambarage Nyerere actually agreed to postpone the independence of Tanzania so that Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania could be independent as one nation. He came here and talked to Kabaka, Mutesa then, and Apollo Milton Obote, and even to Benjamin Kiwanuka, and asked them, let us delay, I'm delaying our independence. He came to Kenya and talked to Jomo Kenyatta and said, I'm delaying my independence. And this is what Mwalimu said. He said, I'm prepared because you, Kenyatta, are older, you will become the president, and what I want is to be ambassador of East Africa to the United Nations. Many people do not know that reality, because he was able to recognize very early that these post-colonial states, which divided ethnicities arbitrarily, were not sustainable. But be that as may, I'm talking about Tanganyika. So in Tanganyika, you also have the revolution in Zanzibar with Sheikh Amani Abeid Karume, and in 1964, there is the union between Tanganyika and Zanzibar to create Tanzania, which then leads to the death of number one, TANU, and leads to the death of Afro-Shirazi Party, and leads to the formation of Chama cha Mapinduzi in 1977. And you can see that Tanzania is also grappling. They are saying, we have this constitution, but where is constitutionalism? What is it that answers to our Tanzania-ness? And it is in that context that you must understand the Arusha Declaration of 1967, because it is a search for Tanzania-ness. It is a search for Tanzania-ness. Apollo Milton Obote, who is a protege of Nyerere, also takes that path and thinks that the common man's charter is a search for Uganda-ness. Of course, that is not realized. In Kenya, we even found something that is called the Lumumba Institute, named for Patrice Emery Lumumba. But Kenya is schizophrenic. We are neither to the east nor to the west. We are confused. There are others who are pro-west and others who are pro-east, and ultimately we end up with session of paper number 10 of 1965 on what we call African socialism. But ultimately, we are bought by the West, and we have remained so bought. And I'm mentioning this that you may understand before I'll come to the second tier of my intervention. That is Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Then we come to Rwanda, Urundi. When we come to Rwanda, Urundi, the conflict is manufactured. The Belgians have created an environment which is going to be a powder keg in both Rwanda and in Burundi in 1962. They have attacked the monarchy in Rwanda. They have created animosity between two peoples whom they call the Tutsi and the Hutu. The Batwa are too small demographically. And ultimately, you now have this conflict that you have the genocide in 1959, and ultimately the genocide in 1994, and the ongoing animus between Rwanda and Burundi. And of course, we know the Paul Kagame administration that is still in power. And RPF is also in the nature of a political movement which is a liberator. So that if you look at the intellectual inclination of the two leaders of Uganda and Rwanda, they are ideologically of the same persuasion. Ideologically, because they were liberators, and their thinking is that they are people who are indispensable, and they have no shortage of people who also tells them that you are Moses holding rod and staff in your hand, parting Red Seas. We want you to continue parting Red Seas. So they are caught up between the adoration by the people that they lead and the demands of these things you call constitutionalism. So when you talk to President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni or you talk to Paul Kagame and you tell them, let us have term limits, he says, but that is Western democracy. My people still think that I should serve them. Who are you? And that argument, there are those who think it is a legitimate question and is a legitimate issue. My friend Norbert, of course, did say, and those of you who are readers of Shakespeare will remember that there is a play by Shakespeare called Measure for Measure. It was written in the year 1623. And one of the quotations you get there is that if you have the power of a giant, it is excellent to have the power of a giant, but it is tyrannous to use it like a giant. And there is also a saying, I think the Baganda also put it, I've repeated it times without number, that no matter how good a dancer you are, you must know when to leave the stage. This is, when we talk about term limits, this is what we are saying. And Nyerere put it so very well in 1985. He said, you are not successful until your successor succeeds. And I think there is merit in that. So when we talk about constitutionalism, we also must remind ourselves, even as I say what I'm saying, we must remind ourselves that there is also culture with which we are fighting. There is a cultural issues. If you are an Omugabe or a Kabaka, you don't cede power. It's God who denies you when he takes you upstairs. How do we deal with those realities? So when we talk about that, then you can see the difficulties with freedom fighters. Tanzania is a different kettle of fish. Those of you who had the advantage of working with Nyerere, I interned with him when he left power. And actually, before 1984, 9th day of December, when I first met him, he understood the dynamics of power. He understood the dynamics of and the frailty of the African nation, the post-colonial African nation. Tanzania has 136 ethnicities, governed differently before the colonialists came. Then you gridlock them into this thing called Tanzania. And he asked, what is Tanzania? Because the first point of identification is that I'm a Mhaya. I'm a Mnyamwezi. How do you reconcile your Nyamweziness with your Tanzanianness? When you come to Uganda, you are Baganda, you are Choli. How do you reconcile your Bagandaness and Choliness, Choliness with your Ugandanness? In the context of this broad brush constitution that talks about an independent judiciary, talks about a legislature, talks about the civil society, talks about the executive, and talks about human rights, which according to that constitution were conceived with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. How do you deal with it? When you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, there are 233 ethnicities and counting. So that when that country is regaining her independence in 1960 with Patrice Emery Lumumba, on day number 1, and I want you to listen to the speech of Lumumba on the day that they were being granted independence. Listen to the speech of Lumumba and the speech of Kasavubu on that day. These are two people going to lead a nation, and they are already thinking differently. And no wonder within 9 months, Lumumba had been assassinated, leading, of course, to Kasavubu and ultimately to the kakistocratic kleptocracy of Mobutu Sese Seko. Kakistocracy to mean a government by your very worst, and kleptocracy to mean a government of thieves. And Congo has never been at rest. So you can have the best constitution you have, but he's talking about Bakongo. He's talking about Bangala. He's talking about Batetela. How do you deal with that? That is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Then you come to Somalia, which is in trouble and where the Ugandan troops are. What is Somalia? Somalia that we know was actually, part of it was a colony of the Italians, which in itself was a sick man of Europe. And then there was a Somaliland, which was a colony of the United Kingdom. On the eve of independence, they are united. And that is why you now see what is happening. If you saw the original flag of Somalia, it has 5 stars to talk about the Somali nation. Somalis in Somalia, Somalis in Ogaden in Ethiopia, Somalis in Djibouti, Somalis in Somaliland. So there is what in law is called irredentism, the desire to claim lost territory, which still, and of course Somalis in Kenya. When you have a constitution that is irredentist in character, how do you have constitutionalism in that regard? So these are the issues that are on the table. And South Sudan, the history of South Sudan is known. And I always remind people to remember that when the Anglo-British group said that South Sudan would be a closed district, the north in Khartoum had been Islamized and Arabized. The south, they say, the English not out, they say, were animist and Christian. And of course, I want you to listen to these words in the year 2009 of John Garang de Mabior. Garang de Mabior goes to Khartoum and says, if you want us to remain as one nation, make unity attractive. Make unity. Garang did not want the split between Sudan and South Sudan. He wanted a united Sudan. But he said, make unity attractive. Ultimately, he dies. We have the administration that we have. But the administration is now a victim of ethnic nationalism. And what is ethnic nationalism flying in the face of a constitution? There is no, the constitutions are innocent. The constitutions are innocent. The nationalism, the Dinka or the Jiang are saying, we are the ones who fought for independence, therefore we must have the cake. The Nuer or the North are saying, we also participated in the struggle for independence, we must have the cake. The Shilluk or the Ocholo are also saying the same thing. The Equatorians are also saying the same thing. So you have a constitution which is only honored in breach. The razzmatazz that was there on the day of independence is immediately attacked by the trials of tribulations of a wedding where the two couples are sleeping on the same bed, but the wife has different dreams and the husband has different dreams. And that is why South Sudan ends up where she is now, the only country in the whole earth with 5 vice presidents. And why do you need? It may look stupid on the face of it, but he is addressing a reality on the ground. That one of our own is there. It is a feel-good effect. It doesn't give you matoke on the table, but it makes you feel good, one of our own. These are the realities that we confront in the continent of Africa. So, as I draw to the conclusion of my presentation, that gives you a scenario of what constitutionalism is about. But let us look at the attempts. I want to take you to 1963. In 1963, between the dates of 22nd of May and the 25th of May, there is a meeting of the 32 heads of states and government of the countries that had regained independence in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. 32 of them. Everybody who spoke recognized how weak the states are. I remember through history the speech of a leader whom many of us do not know, out of a country that we do not know, but as I speak is in turmoil, Central African Republic, David Dacko. David Dacko says, I'm happy to be here because the little country that I had called Central African Republic cannot succeed. I am for unity. Julius Kambarage Nyerere says, we have come here not to remind ourselves of the significance of unity. Unite we must. Ultimately, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah speaks. And he says, if we are serious, then let us live here with one common currency. Let us live here with one army. Let us live here with one foreign policy. Let us live here having decided the capital of the new country called Africa. I do not know what others will say, but on my part, I propose Leopoldville in DRC, which is now Kinshasa. They listen to him not. And we are where we are, grappling with constitutionalism and the nexus between constitutions and constitutionalism. We in East Africa also recognize the significance of having unity as something that would immunize us from ethnicity. And we had the East African Federation from 1967 through to 1977. And many of you here will remember nostalgically General Mugisha Muntu, Miriam Matembe, my good friend, East African Airways. It worked. Today we have Ugandan loss-making, Tanzania loss-making, Kenya loss-making. East African harbors, telecommunication. We sat one examination. There were good days. Then we lost it all. Then in 1999 we came up with what is now East African Community 2. And we said in the new treaty that we'll have a customs union, a common market, common currency, and ultimately a political union. But the leaders were not satisfied. They were not satisfied. So that Benjamin William Mkapa, Mwai Kibaki, and Yoweri Kaguta Museveni himself agreed in the year 2004 to appoint a committee for fast-tracking of political federation in order to ensure that we enjoy rights. The fast-tracking report is delivered to the heads of state, the summit, on the 30th day of November in Arusha 2004, and these were the landmarks. In the year 2009, we would have a common currency. We should be having a common currency. In January 2010, the president of East African Federation would have been appointed. We don't have one 14 years later. And in 2017, we now downgraded it. It's no longer a federation, but a confederation. Ladies and gentlemen, I can talk until the cows come home, but there is no wisdom in so talking. Wisdom only demands that I remind us that the continent of Africa, having talked about Africa, is now in a space where people are grappling with the question of the nexus between constitutions and constitutionalism. We are grappling, as to use the Mao analogy, whether the promises made at the wedding will be fulfilled during the marriage. This is the question. This is the question. And it would appear that that is not happening almost everywhere in Africa. It would appear that the gap between the promise and the delivery, there is something, because I hear people grumbling in South Africa. I hear them grumbling. I hear them grumbling in Namibia. I hear them grumbling. I hear them fighting as I speak in Mozambique. There is an election and we can't even count votes. The Africans can't count votes. The Americans counted 18 million votes within 10 hours. In Kenya, it takes us 2 weeks. In Nigeria, even longer. In Uganda, I don't know how long it takes you, but even when they are counted, you don't agree. And if you look at Africa today, the issue of constitutionalism, this is what is bringing in war. The Ethiopians thought through Meles Zenawi in 1984 that they would immunize Ethiopia from this kind of constitutional turbulence by saying in the constitution that you could actually have secession. And what do we have now? We have had a war in Tigray. There is a threat of war in Oromo. There is an ongoing war in Amhara. And there is a possibility of another conflagration in the Ogaden. Even Ethiopia is suffering. We saw their conflict with Eritrea. South Sudan. Even only yesterday, President Salva Kiir has once again appointed a new team to go for the Tumaini conference in Nairobi. South Sudan itself, there is war. Chad in the Sahel. The organization, African Union, said there will be no unconstitutional changes of power under the Malabo Declaration. We have had unconstitutional change in Gabon, in Niger, in Burkina, in Guinea, and a near successful one in Guinea-Bissau. In other words, what we see as we interrogate these issues is this: how do we ensure that our governments respect constitutions? My view is this. As Fidel Castro once said, when you are pushing the door of revolution, never say die, because you never know when the door will open. In fact, when you are getting tired, that is when the door is about to open. And I believe that one of the things must happen is that we must increase the political maturity of the masses. It is Corazon Cojuangco Aquino in Philippines who said that if the masses do not understand what a constitution is, then what you call an election is nothing but a conspiracy of fools. In other words, it is incumbent upon us to make the masses awake. When the masses are awake, then they'll make demands, because it is still true, as Marx once said, that the safety of the bourgeois demands that the proletariat be kept in the most profound ignorance. And next to ignorance, the worst thing is the arrogance of power. And it can only be nipped through awareness. That is the lesson of history throughout the world. And I hope that in East Africa, we shall be moving through debate, because debate, which is debate that enriches, is the mother's milk of what we call democracy. Lastly, as I grow older, when people tell me democracy, I tell them, what does it mean? Because the Westerners appear to be telling us that democracy equals to multi-party, equals to periodic elections, equals to separation of powers notionally, executive, judiciary, and legislature, equal to having Bill of Rights. You can all have all these, but they are empty shells. In order to have the real thing, the real deal, the people must be aware. That is the lesson of history. And I hope that these engagements will give us the impetus to continue making demands, but speak with the firmness that opens the eyes of the leader, not with the arrogance and stupidity that inflames and justifies their anger. That is my message to all of us. It shall be well with us. And lastly, remember, this is an intergenerational struggle. So if you imagine that all the dividends of your battle will be won during your lifetime, you are deluding yourself. Run your race, run your leg, hand over the baton to one generation and the next generation, and lo and behold, when history is written, it shall be said, there lived a great generation who ran their race well. Thank you.
Indeed, a powerful, critical keynote deserving of a standing ovation. Another round, a powerful one, I beg you to give Professor Patrick Loch Otieno Lumumba.